Hello, my name is Anna and I love trying vintage recipes. So today I'm trying 3 budget recipes from the 1970s. All of today's recipes come to us from Most for the Money main dishes. I'm revisiting this cookbook, but we'll talk more about it a little bit later. One more little thing about the cookbook. It's a Campbell's soup cookbook, and you know what that means. I will be using cream of whatever soup in these recipes. Now, I understand completely that that may not be your thing. There are substitutions for cream soup out there if you want to go ahead and seek those out. Or if you don't like cream soup, you don't want to make a substitution, just don't make these. I have lots and lots of other recipes on my channel that don't have cream soup in them. You know, I don't mind them. A lot of my viewers don't mind them. People that don't like them, please do not get cranky at me in the comments. I've already made these recipes. It's not gonna change anything. This video is done. Cream soup it is. With that, let's get started on my first dish. I'm starting off with this Souperburger recipe. And as you can see, if you look at the ingredients, it makes a massive quantity. This is part of the cooking big chapter of this book. So I'm gonna be cutting this recipe way down. Like usually I go cut in half. I'm dividing everything by 8 basically. In a pan, brown beef and cook onion until tender. I'm starting with some ground beef. This is actually 80-20. I had been using 85-15 in these recipes. 80-20 was on sale. You should use whatever makes you feel comfortable. Whatever you like, whatever your family likes. Some diced onion goes in with that. There's also some oil included in this recipe, but there's enough fat in this beef that I decided not to add it. So yes, while I do try to make these recipes as written the first time, I kind of know in this case from having made several recipes that I'm just gonna be draining that excess oil away anyway. I'm opting out of the extra tablespoon or so of oil. So the meat is browned, the onion is cooked to my liking. I like non-crunchy onions and things. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drain off the bit of fat that's on this, and I'll be right back for the next step. So I've drained the meat and returned it to the pan. So now I have to add my remaining ingredients, and that is some cream of mushroom soup. Yes, this is a Campbell's cookbook, but I'm using store brand cream of mushroom soup. And I believe I kind of forgot to say it at the top of this video. I will be providing a cost per serving for all of these dishes when I taste them. And I'm basing my prices on my local Walmart store. So this is Walmart brand cream of mushroom soup. Next, I need to add a little bit of prepared mustard, a little bit of pepper. And it just says, stir these in, heat and stir occasionally. So let's bring that heat back. This is kind of a little bit of a take on maybe like a sloppy Joe, but rather than being, you know, ketchup or barbecue sauce or whatever, it's more of a creamy thing. I do remember eating something like this as a kid, so I'm interested to give it a try to see if it's the same thing. So I have my Souperburger right here. I think I ate something like this growing up at some point. I think we had more mushrooms in ours, probably because I loved mushrooms as a kid. I mean, I still love mushrooms. So I could see that being a very enticing dish for me. I am gonna dig in here. Similar to what I had, but not the same. The mustard adds something really different to it. It's kind of like a vinegary tang to the end of the bite, like of the taste. It has onion in it. I think it needs a little garlic. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would put in there. I think the pepper level is fine. It just said a dash of pepper, or maybe it said more, but you know, I cut this recipe so down. The original recipe for this is supposed to make 12 cups of the meat mixture. So if you're cooking for a crowd, this would be like a good thing to make ahead of time and then to put into a slow cooker. So like if you're doing a potluck or buffet or something, like people could make their own sandwiches. Actually, I think honestly, this could benefit from a longer simmer time or some time in the slow cooker. I love doing that with things like sloppy joes and meat sauce. The texture of the meat and the taste really improves if you give it a little bit more time. I think this is also supposed to be kind of like a quicker meal. I mean, this came together in like no time. I think this is gonna freeze really well too. But now I need to give you the cost per serving. Get my notebook here. My notes are, I'm not even gonna show you. I included a bun with mine. The original recipe, it doesn't include, it's like serve this on a bun, but it doesn't like include it in the ingredient list. And that brings the cost per serving for just one sandwich to $1.20. So, you know, pretty affordable. Maybe just 1 or 2 small tweaks to it to like change the taste to what I like a little bit more. Now I'm trying out this recipe for sausage skillet Roma, and I will be cutting this recipe in half, but I'll have the full recipe in the description down below. First, I'm starting out with some pork sausage that I've formed into 8 meatballs. Let's get these in here. I formed them and then I kind of put them in the refrigerator while I got the rest of my ingredients together. Great, so now I have to brown these. They are all browned, so I took them out of the pan to set them aside. I am supposed to drain all of this fat away, but it's like there's not a whole heck of a lot in there. You can see like one droplet moving. So I have some onion and I have zucchini, and I have split this lengthwise and then cut it into approximately like 1-inch chunks per the recipe. And please do not make fun of my oddly shaped, not perfectly round meatballs. This is not the meatball channel. Sorry if that's what you thought, but that's, you know, you're gonna get imperfection with me. My next ingredient, and that is some good old cream of mushroom. Again, store brand specifically is what I am using. Like that's what I based my price on. I mix that all together. Whoa, did I lose an onion? I got a little enthusiastic about mixing here. And I'm gonna put my meatballs back in here. Don't worry if you think these are not completely cooked through, because we are gonna cover this and I have to cook this over low heat for 15 minutes. Okay, so I've simmered this for 15 minutes. I did stir it a couple of times. I need to add the final ingredient. That is a tomato that I've cut up into wedges. So now I need to let this cook for about 5 more minutes. So there's my sausage skillet Roma. It smells pretty good. By the way, I do realize I forgot to show myself adding an ingredient. There is 1 clove of garlic that you mix in at the same time that you add the onions and the zucchini. Sorry about that. But it's in there. So these meatballs, they're not like meatballs in the sense where you'd mix different kinds of meat with breadcrumbs and egg or whatever you put in meatballs. These are like literal balls of meat. So this is kind of like a nice meat and veggie dish with a sauce. I'm gonna cut one of these in half so that I can get a bite with like pretty much everything. The sauce was kind of perfect. I was afraid it was gonna be too thick, but that zucchini kind of let off a lot of moisture, as well as the tomatoes that had to cook for a few minutes. Okay, this is gonna be a way big bite. I cannot get it. Okay, we might have to do 2 bites. That is very, very simple, but I like it. You don't need a lot of extra seasonings because the sausage itself is already seasoned, but it just goes really well with those nice fresh veggies, especially the zucchini is so good in this. I can see why they want you to cut the zucchini into like bigger pieces because you don't want it to fall apart, but I definitely need to like cut it into more bite-sized pieces as I eat it. That's very good. You know, it has your veggies and your meat together in there. You could probably add a pasta. Like I think this would actually be really good over pasta or rice, but it's also very good as is. Wow. You know, for as simple as it is, as easy as it is, I'm surprised by how much I like it. Ooh, that was good. This recipe, the full recipe makes 4 servings. I cut it in half, so I have 2 servings. Cost per serving for sausage skillet Roma is $1.59. I think this is such a good value because you already have like your veggie and your meat together in there, and you don't really need to add a lot to it to make it, you know, full dinner kind of meal. I didn't think I disliked this one. I usually try to pick recipes I think I'm at least going to like, if not really like, and I really like this one. It's flavorful. It's got like fresh qualities to it because of that zucchini and tomato. It's nicely seasoned because of the sausage. It's great. I like this one a lot. I'm trying out this recipe for chicken croquettes, and I'm using just leftover chicken that was from my freezer, but I'm gonna be basing my pricing for the chicken off of like a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. Combine 1/3 of a cup of cream of chicken soup. This is a Campbell's soup cookbook after all. Every recipe has soup in it. And now I have some very finely chopped chicken. It's a cup and a half. I'm actually making a full recipe for this because it only makes 3 servings and that's pretty manageable. We've got some dry breadcrumbs. Now this next ingredient may surprise you. It's finely diced celery. Can you believe? Did you think you'd see the day? You know, I can handle cooked celery. You know, I just don't really like raw celery. I do have a feeling though that this celery in this dish may be a little crunchy for me. My personal opinion, I think it would be best if I would, you know, maybe saute the onion and the celery in a little butter or something before putting it in the croquettes. But again, making this recipe sort of as written to try it out and see how it is. Putting the veggies in raw and seeing how it goes. I have some poultry seasoning. I actually don't need all of this for this part of the recipe, so I'm gonna use about half of that. And the rest of the poultry seasoning goes in the sauce. Oh, it smells good. I think it's the poultry seasoning. Get that well combined. Okay, this looks pretty good. It says that, that if I need to, I can actually put this in the refrigerator for a little bit before shaping it into the croquettes. So I think I'm gonna do that just for a minute. So once these were nice and chilled, I went ahead and pulled this mixture out of the refrigerator. Hey everybody, it's voiceover Anna, because somewhere along the way, as I was filming this video, the receiver on my microphone died. So you can see I kind of divided this up into 6 equal-ish portions, and I'm gonna form these into patties. The recipe says you can do either croquettes or patties. I thought patties would just be a little bit easier to manage, easier to cook for me. Now, I actually did miss a step after I formed all of these patties, but I'll talk more about that when I get ready to cook them. I melted just a little bit of shortening in a pan to saute these. I wanted to saute my patties / croquettes rather than do like more of a deep fry on them. And before I started to saute them, I was supposed to roll these in breadcrumbs again. So the reason I didn't do this is because the breadcrumbs, the extra breadcrumbs, were not included in the ingredient list. I do realize my mistake before I start to cook the last 2 patties, so I'm actually going to do a comparison taste test between patties that have not been rolled in breadcrumbs and patties that have. So while that first batch of patties saute, I'm going to make my sauce, and that consists of the rest of the can of cream of chicken soup, some milk, and the rest of the poultry seasoning. And I just whisked all of that together and let it heat through. And this is where I realized that I missed a step. So here are the last 2 patties. I've rolled them in some additional breadcrumbs so that I can try out, the way the recipe is actually supposed to be. The one here by itself, that is one that I've rolled in the breadcrumbs correctly following the recipe. These other 3, I did not. Looks-wise, I like the looks of the ones that I did roll in breadcrumbs better. I can't eat them anymore, but this reminds me of a crab cake a little bit, except with chicken. That is so flavorful. Wow. So now I'm gonna try some of the breadcrumb rolled one. The outside texture is just a little bit different. Between the 2, I honestly like the one that's not been rolled in breadcrumbs a little bit better. There's not a ton of difference in between the tastes. Honestly, I don't know that it's absolutely necessary that you roll these breadcrumbs after you form the patty or the croquettes. It kind of reminds me of like a really delicious chicken and stuffing casserole in a patty. I like that recipe a lot. I don't actually know that the sauce is not super duper necessary. I think that they wanted to incorporate an entire can of soup in this recipe. The patties themselves, even without sauce, very good. All right, cost per serving, let's go. I based my price for the chicken on half of a rotisserie chicken from Walmart. This recipe made 3 servings, and the grand total per serving for this recipe is $1.47. Pretty great. These would go well with maybe a little rice dish. So I'd say maybe a little rice pilaf dish, maybe a vegetable, something like that. It's maybe a little bit more time consuming than a couple of the other recipes, but I do think it's worth it, especially with this delicious, savory brownness on the outside of the patties. Most for the Money main dishes was published in 1975. I mentioned that I am revisiting this cookbook. On this channel, I have made the stuffed shells Neapolitan and soup cookies. I call them soup cookies because they have cheddar cheese soup in them. I think the actual recipe is something like applesauce oatmeal cookies, but come on, Campbell's, you buried the lead. There's soup in these cookies. I'll go ahead and link those 2 videos in the description down below if you haven't already watched them. How did I get this cookbook? I got this cookbook after I went on a tour of the Campbell's Soup Factory that was near where I grew up. I was probably 12. So early 90s is when I got this cookbook, and it was brand spanking new, but it was published in 1975. So, promotional item, they just probably had a ton of them. I see this cookbook a lot in thrift stores, used bookstores, that kind of thing. So it's pretty readily available if you'd like a copy for yourself. I'll also link a used copy in the description down below if you want to purchase it. I try to do that if they're available. I try to link the book so that if you don't want to go searching for one, you just want to buy one, you can do that. So I got this copy when I was around 12 years old, so middle school, and I made the stuffed shells Neapolitan, which are pictured on the back of the book, for a 4-H project. When you're in 4-H, this was my experience, I don't know how it goes for you, but I took a lot of foods projects, of course I did. So food and nutrition projects, and usually you had to do some sort of interview where you prepared a dish, you answered questions about the things that you were taught in your like workbook. You know, maybe you did a place setting, that kind of thing. So this is what I prepared, and I've made this dish like several times since. But I think this is a nice little cookbook. I really like it. Let's start with the binding. I know not everybody loves the double wire ring binding. I happen to really love it because your cookbook lays flat, and it's like a signal to me, like, ooh, that cookbook. If I were to see something like this kind of binding in a store, I'd be like, I need to grab that one and check it out, because it probably means that it's older. You don't see this binding quite as often in modern cookbooks. Maybe part of it does sometimes rust. I noticed that in some older cookbooks, but I still like it. It's still one of my favorites. This is a Campbell's soup cookbook, which means every single recipe has soup in it, like canned soup. You know, a lot of casseroles in here, as you can imagine. We are treated to a lot of photographs in this book. This photo, I'm gonna show this photo, and it has just intrigued me for years. I didn't know what it was, because like if you immediately look at it, you're like, it looks fluffy and green and around sausages or hot dogs. And what it actually is, those are cabbage wedges. So of course it's green. I think there's some kind of cream sauce on top, and that's what makes it look fluffy. But if you just like immediately open it, it kind of looks like the pistachio salad I made, the Watergate salad, like around hot dogs. That doesn't sound good to me. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you want to try it, go right ahead. But those are actually cabbage wedges. It's knockwurst and cabbage is the name of that recipe. One other thing I think is great about this cookbook, you know, there's these like sketches throughout, and you can even see on this one, it looks like they sketched a Corelware dish, and I love that. I think that's so cool. In addition to canned soup, there are also some recipes in here that use like canned spaghetti. I believe maybe at this time, I'll have to do some research, and I'm sure someone will mention it in the comments. At one time, and maybe at this time, Campbell's and like Franco-American had some kind of merger or something. Like someone bought someone and then they owned the canned spaghetti. But most of these recipes have a canned soup of some kind in them. Campbell's also used to make frozen soups. I think I've mentioned this before in some of my other Campbell's soup videos. I've never seen them personally. I don't know when they stopped making them. They would make frozen canned soups, and it would be like the frozen orange juice concentrate that you can buy in those kind of cans. I'd love to hear about your experience with that kind of soup. Did it taste better? It seems like they had some more interesting varieties, at least from the cookbooks that I have read. So yeah, tell me about that. I wonder if it just stopped being like a big seller and they just phased it out. I don't know. Look at this Yankee chili recipe. Like that looks good and hearty, and it looks like it would probably be pretty cost effective. There's some macaroni in there, there's beef, there's beans, like all very filling things. Depending on what type of beef you use, you know, it probably is pretty cost effective. All of the recipes in here are budget recipes, most for the money main dishes. So things that are not gonna be too expensive, that are gonna feed your family. I respect that. Yeah, look at this potluck section. I love the sketch on that. What else do I wanna show you? There's a few desserts in here. In addition to those cookies, there's a cheesecake pie. Why? What's in here? Oh. So this also has condensed cheddar cheese soup in it. I didn't even notice that cheesecake pie. That is interesting to me. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. If you want to make it, here, you know what? I'll show you the recipe again. If someone in my audience wants to make this, you know, just pause now, read that recipe. I'll leave it up to you. There's an apple crisp, again with the cheddar cheese soup. Heck yeah, there's so many more desserts in this book than I expected. Oh, I think we have a picture. That is the cheesecake pie. It looks delicious. It does not look orange. You know, even though there's cheddar cheese soup in it, you'd maybe expect it to be orange, but it's not. As for the dishes I made today, the first recipe I made was for Souperburger. And I mentioned that I ate something like this when I was a kid. But you know, as I cooked the recipe, it turned out it was similar, but like not the same. You know, I rewatched the footage after I made the rest of my recipes just to kind of like refresh my thoughts on it. And it was very different than what I ate as a kid. I'm not really sure. I can't put my finger on exactly what was different because I thought my mom kind of like made it the same way. But you know, after I made the other two dishes, and those were very flavorful and tasty, the Souperburger, it wasn't like not good, but I don't think it was as good as those other two dishes. I think it needs some updates, some tweaks to make it what I would really want it to be. I don't think I would make it again as is. A longer simmer time on that, I think, could go a long way. a long way in improving it. You would probably need to add some additional liquid, like maybe some broth, so that you could have that long simmer time. There wasn't enough liquid to like cook it for a long time. It was mostly just like add the soup and heat it through and then eat it. I think if you have that long simmer time, it improves the texture of the meat a lot and it adds a lot of flavor. Garlic would be good. I think maybe some like garlic powder or onion powder or something. There was just like something lacking in the flavor and I couldn't exactly pinpoint what it was. I think sauteed mushrooms, again, I love mushrooms, but yeah, I think some sauteed mushrooms added to that could also really, really improve it. It's a start, but I would probably, if I tried to make that again, I would definitely make some changes. So the second dish that I made was sausage skillet Roma. I loved that. I really did. I think the addition of like the zucchini and the tomatoes, having those like fresh vegetables in there just really went pretty far in making it extra delicious. You didn't need a lot of extra seasonings because the sausage in the dish was already very well seasoned. I think I'm gonna have that for lunch today. I'm gonna cook a little pasta. I just feel like it could go really well with some like penne pasta. I would definitely make it again. And it was $1.59 a serving. You know, even if you added a little bit of pasta to it, that wouldn't increase the cost very much. And it was like your meat, your vegetable. It was delicious. I really enjoyed that one more than I thought. Sorry, I had to answer the door, so I have no idea what I was just talking about. I think it was sausage skillet Roma. Anyway, great dish, really great dish, very surprising. I would make it again. Like for sure I would, Third dish, chicken croquettes. And I chose to make mine into more of a patty shape. The recipe said it was fine to do that. I think this was my favorite. I really do. Very flavorful. So much more than I thought it would be. Between the cream of chicken soup and like that little bit of poultry season, I think it was perfect. I think you could try to make this and adapt it without the cream soup. I didn't really, I don't think the sauce added anything. You needed the like part of the cream soup, like 1/3 of a cup of it, to bind your croquettes or patties together. And then the rest of it was really for the sauce. I mean, I didn't need the sauce. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I probably would not bother with that sauce again. So what I would do instead, you know, if I was gonna use the cream soup, I'd use it to bind the patties. I'd probably just freeze the rest for a future recipe. Or my other thought is maybe, because you do need something to bind the chicken like croquettes together, you might be able to like sub in an egg or something and do that instead and see if that would work for you. You know, I know it's in a soup cookbook, but I don't think the soup was like absolutely necessary. I really don't. Although it did add a lot of flavor. Gosh, I don't know. I'm kind of like torn on this one. I just don't think you needed this sauce, and that was like where the bulk of the soup went. Folks, I have had to answer my door 3 times during this filming. That never happens, but I think the universe is trying to tell me to wrap it up. Just a couple of additional thoughts on those chicken croquettes. I don't think rolling in them in the crumbs was absolutely necessary either. Maybe that doesn't technically make them croquettes, but I liked the ones that I didn't roll in the additional breadcrumbs better. They also had a pretty strong nostalgia factor because they kind of reminded me of salmon patties, only with chicken. Tasted like chicken and stuffing casserole, just like a really warm, hearty meal, a lot of savory, delicious flavor, probably something that would remind you of home. So we're through the 1970s. You can probably guess next week I'm gonna do budget recipes from the 1980s. So I hope to see you there. I hope you got some inspiration from this video for your meal planning, or maybe you were reminded of a recipe that you haven't made in a long time. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to see some additional content from me, you can join me over on Patreon. I will leave a link in the description down below if you're interested. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.